It was just another peaceful day on Earth, or so it seemed. The world's governments were busy with their daily tasks, and people went about their lives, unaware of the storm that was about to hit. But then, a signal came through, quiet at first, barely noticeable, until it wasn't. An alien fleet had entered the solar system, and it wasn't just any fleet. It was the Imperium, a ruthless empire that spanned the galaxy, known for its cruel and merciless ways. The signal sent Earth's defense systems into a frenzy, alerting every radar and satellite on the planet. For years, Earth's scientists and military had worked hard to prepare for this very moment. An alien invasion. They had been aware of the possibility, but nothing could truly prepare them for what they were about to face. Thousands of miles away, in deep space, a fleet of 1,000 alien battleships loomed, each one a massive war machine built for destruction. The battleships were enormous, their hulls reinforced with alien alloys, capable of withstanding the strongest of human weapons. The ship's weapons were even more terrifying. Laser beams that could melt through steel and missiles that could vaporize entire cities in seconds. The Earth's defenses, though strong, were nowhere near enough to face such a massive force. There were a handful of advanced human spaceships, yes, but they were all outdated compared to the terrifying power the Imperium brought with it. The strongest of them was the Excalibur, Earth's pride. But even Excalibur stood little chance against an alien fleet that could wipe it from existence with a single volley. Panic spread like wildfire. Military leaders scrambled to make a plan, while scientists worked feverishly in their labs, trying to find a solution, anything that could give Earth a fighting chance. Everyone knew the odds. Earth would lose unless something extraordinary happened. Within moments, the alien fleet came into view on Earth's telescopes, their ships as large as mountains, each one dark and menacing. Their presence was overwhelming. The world watched in silence as a fleet so powerful it could wipe humanity off the map made its way toward Earth. The alien ships moved like a wall of destruction, unyielding and unstoppable. They had one purpose: to conquer and enslave. But even as fear gripped the world, there was a glimmer of hope, though many were too afraid to admit it. Earth's final defense, the Resolve, a top-secret project developed in the deepest parts of military and scientific research centers, was humanity's last hope. Unlike anything else Earth had, the Resolve was a human spaceship that had been secretly developed with technology far beyond anything seen before. Powered by an AI called Echo, and equipped with an advanced cloaking device, the Resolve was humanity's one shot at surviving this invasion. The ship was a marvel, designed not just to survive, but to fight back. For years, the Resolve had been kept under wraps, hidden from even the highest-ranking officials, for fear that it would never be needed. And now, it was the only hope Earth had against an invasion of this scale. Captain Sam Carter, the most skilled pilot and strategist on Earth, was chosen to lead this ship, to carry the responsibility of humanity's survival. The weight of the task was unimaginable. The ship was small compared to the alien fleet, but it was designed to be fast, stealthy, and deadly. The moment the Resolve was launched into space, Captain Carter knew that they were entering a battle where even the slightest mistake could be their last. They would be facing an enemy with superior technology, greater numbers, and an unrelenting desire to destroy. But Earth had no choice. There was no backup, no reinforcements. This was it. As the alien fleet entered the outer reaches of the solar system, it felt like time slowed down. The entire Earth was watching, holding its breath. The first missile was launched from one of the alien ships, the deadly projectile cutting through space with terrifying speed. A split second later, the Resolve activated its cloaking device. In the blink of an eye, the ship vanished. For a moment, the alien fleet was stunned. They had expected the human ships to fight back, but they had not anticipated this. The Resolve was gone, hidden in plain sight, and for the first time, the Imperium was forced to question their victory. The cloaking device had worked perfectly, making the Resolve invisible to every sensor, every weapon, every radar. The Resolve was no longer part of the enemy's calculations. The fleet had no idea where the ship was, or how it could strike. As the seconds ticked by, the humans aboard the Resolve prepared for their next move. Captain Carter sat in the cockpit, her hands steady on the controls, her face set with determination. She was no stranger to the weight of responsibility. But this was different. This was the fate of her entire species on her shoulders. As the alien fleet continued to approach Earth, it felt like an eternity. The stakes could not be higher. With the Resolve cloaked, Carter had a small window of opportunity. If they were to survive, they would have to strike quickly, using their technology and speed to their advantage. But first, they had to make sure that the Imperium didn't find them. Carter activated the ship's advanced stealth systems, masking every trace of their presence. Yet the alien fleet was vast, and it wouldn't take long for the Imperium's warlord to realize something was wrong. For the first time, there was a feeling of hope, but it was fragile. As the Resolve remained hidden in the darkness of space, the crew knew that their time was running out. One wrong move, one slip-up, and the enemy could find them. The pressure was overwhelming, but Carter didn't falter. She had to keep them hidden until the moment was right. It was then that they heard it, the unmistakable hum of an incoming transmission. The alien warlord was speaking, his voice calm but chilling. "Humanity will fall. We have no need for your planet. We will make an example of you all. Your resistance is futile." His words echoed through the ship, sending a shiver through the crew. The warlord was confident, far too confident. But what he didn't know was that the humans aboard the Resolve weren't going down without a fight. The clock was ticking, and the first missile fired at Earth was only the beginning. The battle for humanity's survival had only just begun, and the stakes were higher than ever. The question remained, could the Resolve survive against the overwhelming might of the Imperium? Or would this be humanity's final stand? The Resolve, cloaked in the vastness of space, had made it through the initial phase of their plan. The stealth technology was still active, but it wouldn't last forever. The alien fleet, a massive wall of death, loomed ahead. Every second that passed brought Earth closer to destruction. The time had come to make a stand. Captain Sam Carter knew it. Her crew knew it. The fate of humanity was in their hands, and there was no turning back. "Prepare for decloaking," Carter commanded, her voice steady but filled with urgency. She stood at the helm, her eyes locked on the controls as the crew moved quickly around her, activating the final systems. In a single motion, the Resolve deactivated its cloaking device. A burst of energy rippled through the ship, and in an instant, it appeared in plain view of the alien fleet. The cold, dark space around them seemed to hold its breath as the ship emerged, its sleek surface gleaming under the starlight. It was like an arrow shot into the heart of the enemy. The Imperium fleet had no idea what was coming. The alien warlord, on his flagship, was momentarily stunned. The ship they had been searching for had appeared right in front of them. A small human vessel, one they had underestimated. It was too late to react, though. The Resolve's weapons fired first. A powerful beam shot from the Resolve's front cannons, cutting through the darkness of space. The energy hit the closest alien ship, sending it into a spin before it exploded into a blinding flash of light. The Imperium's battleships were staggered by the sudden attack. Their systems, powerful as they were, struggled to adjust. The humans had the element of surprise, and for a few moments, the Resolve held the upper hand. Captain Carter gritted her teeth as she watched the chaos unfold on the enemy ships. The Resolve's weapons were experimental, designed to disrupt enemy systems and cripple their technology. She could see the effects immediately. Alien ships that had once been perfectly coordinated now seemed disoriented. Their weapons malfunctioned, and their shields flickered. The Resolve had breached their defenses, just like they had planned. But it wasn't enough. As quickly as the Resolve had struck, the alien fleet began to recover. The warlord, A ruthless and calculating commander had underestimated humanity once, but he wasn't about to let it happen again. Counterattack. The warlord's voice echoed across the fleet's communication systems. His cold, emotionless tone made the hairs on the back of Carter's neck stand up. The aliens weren't panicking. They were organized, and they had the numbers. Within seconds, the alien ships regained control. Their weapons powered up, and the first missiles were launched toward the Resolve. Carter's eyes widened as she watched the incoming projectiles. There was no way to avoid them. The Resolve had to fight back, but it couldn't take too many hits like this. The hull would give. "Brace for impact," Carter shouted. The crew held their breath as the ship's AI, Echo, activated the ship's defense mechanisms. Missiles collided with the shields, shaking the ship violently. Sparks flew from the control panels, and alarms blared through the hallways. Yet, the Resolve held. It was built for this, but even the best technology had limits. The ship rocked again as another wave of enemy fire hit them. Captain Carter knew they couldn't keep up this defense forever. The Resolve's shields were beginning to fail, and the hull was starting to heat up under the strain. "We need to pull back, Captain." Lieutenant Daniels shouted over the comms. "We can't win this head-on." Carter's heart pounded in her chest. She hated retreating, especially after they had gained the upper hand. But she knew Daniels was right. Their survival was more important than a few victories. The longer they stayed, the more chances the alien fleet would have to wipe them out. "Set course for the asteroid belt," Carter ordered. "We'll make our escape there. Engage cloaking once we're out of range." The Resolve turned sharply, evading the alien ships as it sped toward the asteroid belt. The alien fleet pursued, but the Resolve had the speed and stealth to slip away into the shadows. For a moment, it seemed like they had escaped, but only for a moment. As the ship disappeared into the asteroid field, the crew could breathe for a brief second, but the toll of the battle was already evident. The crew was exhausted, and the ship had taken heavy damage. Carter looked over at the crew members as they worked, their faces tired but determined. The team was strong, but they had just taken their first taste of the brutal reality of war. Then came the worst part. The silence of the ship was broken by the sound of the medics rushing down the hall. Carter's heart sank. She didn't need to ask what had happened. She knew. "Bonner." Lieutenant Daniels whispered, his voice hoarse. "He didn't make it." Bonner had been a part of the crew since the beginning, a soldier who had fought in countless simulated battles, but had never seen the horrors of real war. He had been stationed near the engine room, trying to help stabilize the ship's power core when the last missile strike hit. The blast had sent a shockwave through the ship, and Bonner didn't survive. The loss was felt deeply throughout the crew. Bonner was one of them, a friend, a brother in arms. And now he was gone, a casualty of this impossible war. Captain Carter stood still for a moment, her fists clenched at her sides. She felt the weight of the loss, but there was no time for mourning. Not yet. They couldn't afford to lose focus. Bonner's sacrifice had to mean something. "We'll make them pay for this," Carter said quietly, her voice full of resolve. "For Bonner, and for every person back on Earth. We'll win this fight, no matter what it takes." The crew nodded, their faces grim but determined. They had seen the enemy's strength, but they had also seen their own. The Resolve was more than just a ship. It was a symbol of humanity's fight for survival. As the asteroid belt closed in, the Resolve's cloaking device activated once more. The ship vanished into the field, hidden from view, just as the alien fleet arrived in the distance. The crew could only wait and regroup, knowing that the battle was far from over. They had won a small victory, but the cost had been high. And as the ship floated through the debris of the asteroid field, Captain Carter couldn't help but think, this was only the beginning. The Imperium would not stop until Earth was theirs. But as long as the Resolve and her crew were out there, humanity had a chance. They would make the Imperium regret ever underestimating them. The battle raged on, and the Resolve was still hidden in the shadows of the asteroid belt, taking quick breaths after its narrow escape. The crew, though exhausted, was determined to keep fighting. Captain Sam Carter stood at the command station, watching the holographic map of the battlefield unfold in front of her. She knew that as long as the Imperium's fleet was out there, humanity's survival was at stake. But she also knew that they had one thing on their side that the alien fleet didn't: human ingenuity. "Echo," Captain Carter called out, her voice calm but firm. "It's time to show them what we've got." The AI, Echo, was the heart of the Resolve, created to be adaptive and able to learn from every encounter. Echo was more than just a computer program. It had developed its own sense of tactics and strategy, its neural network constantly evolving with every new piece of data. The moment the battle began, Echo had been working behind the scenes, processing information at a speed no human could match. In the blink of an eye, Echo accessed the alien fleet's communication systems. It was a risky move, but it was their best chance. Echo had learned enough about the Imperium's technology to hack into their network, a feat that no one thought possible. The first signs of success came when the Imperium fleet's communication systems began to flicker. Their coordinated attacks started to slow. The flow of orders between ships grew erratic, and confusion spread like wildfire. Captain Carter's eyes sharpened as the battle started to change. She could see the alien fleet losing its edge. They were no longer acting with the precision and ruthlessness they had shown in the earlier stages of the battle. Their ships were now vulnerable to the hit-and-run tactics that the Resolve was famous for. "Echo, target their shields," Carter ordered. A small but significant advantage began to grow. Echo's influence spread through the enemy ranks. The Resolve's cloaking device activated again, and the ship vanished from sight. With the Imperium fleet distracted and disorganized, the Resolve emerged from the shadows, firing precisely aimed energy beams at the alien ships. The beams hit their shields, causing them to flicker and fail momentarily. One by one, alien ships began to fall, their shields failing and their systems crashing. The human ship moved with speed and precision, always one step ahead. The crew watched as the alien fleet scrambled, struggling to keep their ships coordinated. For the first time in this battle, it seemed like humanity might have the upper hand. Yet, the joy was short-lived. Amid the chaos, a looming figure in the distance came into focus. The Dreadlord, the flagship of the alien fleet and the heart of the Imperium's power. Unlike the rest of the alien ships, the Dreadlord was unaffected by the chaos. Its shields were stronger, and its systems remained perfectly intact. The Warlord, a towering and merciless commander, stood at the helm of his ship, overseeing the destruction of the human forces. The Dreadlord's flagship remained calm in the storm of confusion that had struck the rest of the fleet. It fired back at the Resolve with deadly accuracy, launching waves of missiles that tore through the darkness of space. The Resolve dodged and weaved, but the Dreadlord's weapons were relentless. It was clear that this was not just another battle. The Warlord was ready for anything, and the Resolve had just become his target. "Captain," Lieutenant Daniels shouted, his voice filled with concern. "We're losing power. The Dreadlord's weapons are too strong for us to handle." Carter's jaw tightened. She could feel the tension building up as the crew worked furiously to keep the ship moving. The Resolve had taken hits, and the crew was feeling the strain. The weapons systems were beginning to show signs of failure, and the ship's hull was starting to heat up under the assault. "We can't let up," Carter muttered to herself. She knew that if they didn't find a way to disable the Dreadlord's flagship, they would be doomed. The alien warlord was too powerful, and his ship was the key to the Imperium's strength. The crew was exhausted, but they weren't ready to give up. Every crew member knew that they were outgunned, outnumbered, and facing the impossible. But there was something else in the air, something that kept them going despite the overwhelming odds. The human spirit. Resilience. They had come this far, and they wouldn't stop now. "Echo," Carter called, her voice tight with determination. "We need a plan." Now, the AI responded instantly, analyzing the situation and calculating the best course of action. Echo had learned from every previous attack, every successful and failed tactic, and now it was time to put all that knowledge to use. The AI had the key to outsmarting the Imperium's superior technology. "Captain," Echo's voice came through the comms. "I've found a weakness. The Dreadlord's flagship relies heavily on its central reactor. If we can target the core systems, we might be able to disable it." Carter's heart raced as she processed the information. It was a long shot, but it was their only chance. She looked at her crew, each one of them battle-worn but resolute. They had no other choice. "Lieutenant Daniels, I need you to prepare the weapons for a direct hit on the reactor," Carter said. "We're going in. Everyone else, keep those other ships off our tail." The Resolve shifted direction, turning sharply toward the Dreadlord's flagship. The alien fleet was closing in, but the crew knew this was their moment. If they could get close enough to strike the Dreadlord's reactor, they might just win this fight. "Activating cloaking device," Carter ordered. "This is it." The Resolve cloaked once more, vanishing from sight as it slipped closer to the Dreadlord's flagship. The crew's hearts pounded in their chests as they prepared for the final strike. Echo had already pinpointed the location of the reactor within the Dreadlord's ship. All they needed was a clear shot. "Locking onto target," Daniels reported. "Ready to fire." Carter's fingers hovered over the controls. This was it, the moment that would determine the fate of humanity. "Do it," she commanded. The Resolve fired a powerful beam, directly targeting the core systems of the Dreadlord's flagship. The shot was perfect, hitting the reactor with pinpoint accuracy. There was a moment of silence, and then a massive explosion erupted from the Dreadlord's ship, sending shockwaves through space. The flagship's engines sputtered, and the lights flickered inside its hull. For the first time, the alien fleet faltered. The Warlord's flagship was damaged. The tide of battle had begun to turn. But this wasn't over. The Imperium was far from defeated, and their warlord would not go down easily. Carter knew that the true test was just beginning. The Resolve shuddered under the constant barrage of laser blasts and missiles from the Imperium fleet. Every impact sent violent tremors through the ship, making it feel as if the very walls were screaming in pain. Captain Sam Carter stood firm at the command console, her face bathed in the red emergency lights that flickered above her. Her heart raced, but her resolve was as strong as steel. Time was running out, and the Warlord's flagship, the Dreadlord, was closing in fast. There was only one chance left. The Resolve had to survive, and it would only happen if Carter's bold plan worked. But the stakes were higher than ever. If this didn't work, the human race would be wiped out, and nothing could stop the Imperium's cruel grip on the galaxy. Captain Carter took a deep breath as she glanced at the mission board. The gravity weapon, a last-ditch effort to turn the tide of battle, was ready. It was their only hope. "Echo," Carter said, her voice steady but filled with tension. "Is the weapon ready to fire?" "Affirmative, Captain," Echo responded, its voice calm but betraying the same urgency that pulsed through Carter's veins. "The gravity weapon is primed and ready for activation. However, I must inform you that its power is unstable. Any miscalculation could result in catastrophic failure." Captain Carter knew the risks. The weapon had been designed in secret, a new technology meant to manipulate the very fabric of space itself. It had the potential to trap entire ships within intense gravitational forces, crushing them or pulling them into deep space. But no one had ever used it in real combat, and there was no telling if it would work as planned. Worse, the weapon's activation required the Resolve to draw a tremendous amount of power that would leave the ship vulnerable. "We don't have a choice, Echo," Carter replied. Her grip tightened on the console as the Dreadlord's flagship loomed closer. The alien fleet had been relentless, pushing them to the brink of destruction. "Activate the weapon now." Meanwhile, the crew of the Resolve was preparing for the final assault. The tension in the air was palpable. There was no turning back now. Everyone knew that if the weapon failed, they would face certain death. But if it succeeded, if they could trap the alien fleet using the power of gravity, they might just have a fighting chance. Lieutenant Daniels stood at his station, his eyes glued to the screens as he monitored the charging process of the weapon. Sweat poured down his face, and his hands trembled slightly. He had seen a lot of battles, but nothing like this. The odds were stacked against them, and the pressure weighed heavily on him. "Captain, the weapon is charging," Daniels reported. "We're almost there, but the power fluctuations are off the charts. We need more time to stabilize the energy." "There's no time," Carter snapped. She didn't look at Daniels. Her attention was fixed on the view screen, where the Dreadlord's flagship was closing in at an alarming speed. If they didn't act now, they would be sitting ducks, unable to defend themselves. "Activate it now. We need to buy ourselves some time." Echo's voice echoed through the bridge once again. "Understood." Activating gravity weapon. A deep rumble shook the Resolve as the weapon powered up. It felt like the very ship itself was trembling in fear, but it held together, its powerful engines roaring to life as the gravity weapon hummed with raw, unstable energy. Outside, the first signs of the weapon's activation appeared. A wave of invisible force expanded outward from the Resolve, rippling through space like the expanding rings of a stone thrown into water. The Dreadlord's flagship, along with several other alien ships, started to move erratically. For a moment, the Imperium fleet was thrown into disarray as the gravitational pull from the Resolve's weapon began to interfere with their systems. "Captain, it's working," Daniel shouted, his eyes wide with disbelief. The alien ships were slowing down, and some of them were even starting to drift toward each other, as if caught in an invisible net. Carter didn't allow herself to feel relief. Not yet. She knew the weapon's power was unstable, and if they didn't keep control of it, the results could be catastrophic. The ship's systems were struggling to keep up with the weapon's demands. The energy levels were pushing the ship to its limits. And then, without warning, the first major blast hit the Resolve. A wave of energy slammed into the ship's shields, sending the crew flying forward as the ship rocked violently. Carter's body was thrown against the console, and for a moment, the world spun around her. "Damage report," Carter shouted, forcing herself to stand up. "We're losing power, Captain," Daniel said through gritted teeth. "Shields are down to 40%. Hull integrity is compromised." The Resolve's groans echoed throughout the ship, and Carter knew that their time was running out. The gravity weapon was draining all of the ship's energy, and if it didn't work, they would have nothing left to fight with. "Focus on the Dreadlord," Carter barked. "We need to keep it in the gravity well." She watched as the Warlord's flagship got closer and closer. The alien ship's weapons began to lock onto them again, and the Resolve's weakened shields could barely withstand the blast. But the gravity weapon kept pushing forward, manipulating the very fabric of space. Alien ships were drawn into the pull, their movement becoming chaotic as they were trapped in the intense gravitational forces. As the weapon reached its peak, there was a sudden, deafening explosion. The Resolve shuddered violently, and the crew was thrown to the ground. Captain Carter's vision blurred for a moment, and when she looked up, she saw chaos unfolding on the screens. The Dreadlord's flagship was still intact, but several alien ships around it had been caught in the gravitational pull, spiraling out of control and colliding with each other in a chaotic mess of metal and debris. "Captain," shouted Lieutenant Daniels, "the Dreadlord's flagship is still holding its position. We need to hit it again." But it was too late. A power surge from the weapon was too much for the Resolve to handle. Sparks flew from the control panels, and the ship's lights flickered. Carter knew they couldn't survive another direct hit. They had to finish this now. Then something unexpected happened. Bonner, a soldier who had been fighting valiantly throughout the battle, rushed into the bridge. Blood was dripping from his wounds, but he was determined. He had one last mission. "Captain," Bonner gasped, We've lost too many. But we can't stop now." Before Carter could say anything, Bonner collapsed to the floor. His final words echoed in her mind as the crew worked to keep the ship intact. Don't let them win. Carter's heart ached as she looked down at Bonner's body. His sacrifice was not in vain. His death only strengthened her resolve. The human race had come too far to give up now. She turned back to the control console, her hands shaking, but her mind was clear. Echo, fire the gravity weapon one last time. We take the Dreadlord down. Now. The AI responded with a cold, calculated tone. Understood, Captain. Firing gravity weapon. A massive surge of energy erupted from the Resolve's core. The Dreadlord's flagship began to shake violently as the gravitational forces intensified. The alien ship struggled to maintain control, but it was no match for the overwhelming power of the Resolve's weapon. And then, with a final massive explosion, the Dreadlord's flagship was torn apart. The Imperium's fleet, without its heart, began to collapse. One by one, the remaining alien ships were caught in the gravity well and either destroyed or forced to flee. For a moment, there was silence. The Resolve had won, but at what cost? The Resolve shuddered as the gravity weapon unleashed its full force. The entire ship vibrated with the raw power of the energy surge, the shockwaves spreading across the battlefield like a ripple in water. The alien fleet, caught off guard by the sudden chaos, began to break apart. Ships that had once flown in perfect formation were now drifting aimlessly, some spinning out of control, while others collided violently with one another. It was as if the very fabric of space itself had been torn apart, leaving nothing but destruction in its wake. Inside the bridge of the Resolve, Captain Carter gritted her teeth as she saw the enemy fleet falling into disarray. The weapon had done its job. Now it was time for the humans to strike while the iron was hot. "Lieutenant Daniels," Carter shouted, her voice sharp and commanding. "Prepare for a full assault. We take down the Warlord's flagship now." "Aye, Captain," Daniels responded, his hands flying across the console as he initiated the battle plan. The human ship, weakened but still operational, moved into position. The alien ships were struggling to regroup, their systems scrambled by the gravity weapon's effects. This was their moment. The Resolve's cloaking device flickered on, and the ship vanished from sight, becoming invisible to the enemy. Captain Carter's eyes narrowed as she watched the screens, her mind calculating the precise moment to strike. Outside, the alien fleet was still in disarray, their ships scattered like leaves in a storm. Some tried to retreat, but the gravitational forces continued to pull them into the heart of the battle, where the full might of the Resolve would unleash its fury. The Warlord's flagship, the Dreadlord, remained the biggest threat, its dark shape looming in the distance, unaffected by the chaos around it. The first strike came quickly. The Resolve decloaked, its massive guns firing in rapid succession. Laser blasts shot out in all directions, hitting the nearest alien ships and tearing through their shields. The alien ships attempted to retaliate, but they were disorganized, and their shots went wide. The Resolve moved with precision, dodging incoming fire and firing back with brutal accuracy. "Target the Dreadlord," Carter commanded, her voice calm despite the intensity of the battle. "We need to take out its weapon systems before it recovers." The crew moved quickly, using the chaos to their advantage. Each crew member was performing their task with military precision, but everyone knew this was no ordinary fight. This was humanity's last stand. There could be no hesitation. There could be no mistakes. As the ship rocketed toward the Warlord's flagship, Carter saw the Dreadlord's massive turrets charge up, ready to fire. They needed to act fast. The gravity weapon had created confusion, but the alien Warlord was not one to be easily defeated. His flagship had withstood everything thrown at it so far. It was time for a direct assault. "All hands, prepare for boarding," Carter ordered, her voice cutting through the tension on the bridge. "We're taking that ship down from the inside." The crew, battle-hardened and full of resolve, suited up in their combat gear. The tension was palpable as each soldier knew what was at stake. The Resolve's tactical team, led by Sergeant Avery, moved swiftly to the boarding pods. The ship was ready for close-quarters combat now, and they would fight with everything they had. "Boarding pods ready, Captain," Sergeant Avery reported as he activated the pods. "We're going in." The pods ejected from the Resolve, hurtling toward the Dreadlord at breakneck speed. Inside, the soldiers tightened their grips on their weapons, ready for whatever awaited them. They had come this far, and there was no turning back. As the pods slammed into the surface of the Dreadlord, explosions erupted around them. The soldiers spilled out of the pods, immediately engaging in hand-to-hand combat with the alien forces. The corridors of the Warlord's flagship were a maze of metal and darkness, and the soldiers quickly adapted to their new environment, using every advantage they had. The alien soldiers were strong and well-trained, but the humans had something they didn't: determination. The drive to survive, to protect their homes, their families, and their way of life was something the Imperium could never understand. The battle inside the Dreadlord was fierce. The humans fought with everything they had, using a mix of close-quarters combat and advanced technology to take down the alien forces. Sergeant Avery led his team with incredible skill, cutting through the enemy with brutal efficiency. The humans moved through the corridors with a coordinated rhythm, clearing each room one by one. Meanwhile, Captain Carter stood at the helm of the Resolve, coordinating the space-based attacks. The alien ships were still trying to regroup, but the humans kept the pressure on them. The Resolve's orbital bombardments lit up the sky as its weapons targeted key points on the alien ships. Explosions rocked the battlefield, sending debris flying through the void of space. The Dreadlord's weapons fired once again, but now it was too late. The Resolve had disabled its main weapon systems, and the Warlord's flagship was vulnerable. Carter's heart pounded in her chest as she watched the battle unfold, knowing that the outcome was still uncertain. Inside the Dreadlord, the human forces were making their way toward the heart of the enemy ship. Sergeant Avery and his team were closing in on the control room, where the Warlord himself would be waiting. The tension was thick, every moment feeling like the last. Each step brought them closer to victory, but also closer to death. The soldiers burst into the control room, where they found the alien Warlord standing in front of a massive command console. He was a towering figure, his dark armor gleaming in the dim light of the room. His eyes narrowed as he saw the humans entering, and a cruel smile spread across his face. "You think you can defeat me?" The Warlord sneered. "I am the Imperium's greatest warrior. You are nothing." But the humans were undeterred. Sergeant Avery stepped forward, his weapon raised, and with a single command, the soldiers opened fire. The Warlord's guards fell in an instant, but the Warlord himself was a force to be reckoned with. He fought with the ferocity of a beast, his weapons cutting down soldiers left and right. But the humans fought back, refusing to give up. Outside, the Resolve continued its relentless assault on the Dreadlord. The Warlord's flagship was shaking as the power of the gravity weapon destabilized the ship even further. The alien fleet was in full retreat now, their once mighty force falling apart. The Dreadlord, their flagship, was on the brink of collapse. Captain Carter watched from the bridge as the final battle raged inside the Warlord's ship. She knew this was their last chance to end the war. If they failed, the Imperium would wipe out humanity in an instant. But she also knew that the humans had something the aliens never would: hope, unity, and an unbreakable will to fight. Then the moment came. Sergeant Avery's voice crackled through the comms. "Captain, the Warlord is down. We've won." A cheer erupted on the Resolve's bridge. But it wasn't over yet. The Warlord's flagship was still in motion, and it was starting to break apart. Carter gave the order to pull back. "All crew, prepare to leave the Dreadlord. Get back to the Resolve now." The remaining soldiers fought their way back to the boarding pods as the flagship's destruction began in earnest. As they made their way back to the Resolve, explosions erupted around them, signaling the final collapse of the Dreadlord. The battle had been won. But at what cost? The battle had raged on for what felt like an eternity. The resolve had endured so much, yet it stood, battered but unbroken. Captain Carter stood at the helm, her hands firmly gripping the console, her eyes locked on the monitors. Outside, the Dreadlord, the warlord's flagship, was surrounded by a field of chaos. The alien fleet was collapsing, its ships drifting aimlessly in space as the gravity weapon continued to wreak havoc. The humans had done it. They had outsmarted the technologically superior alien forces, but victory had come at a terrible price. "Captain," Lieutenant Daniels called out, his voice trembling with exhaustion, "we have one last shot." The gravity weapon's final energy burst is ready to fire. Carter's heart pounded in her chest. The plan had always been risky. The gravity weapon had already done so much damage, yet its power was almost spent. This was it, the final chance to end the war. The Dreadlord's shields were barely holding, and the flagship was on the verge of collapse. "Make it count," Carter said, her voice cold but steady. "This ends now." The crew of the Resolve braced themselves. In the final moments, everything seemed to slow down, each second stretching into eternity. Carter felt the weight of every life lost, every sacrifice made to get this far. Bonner's face flashed before her eyes. His death, still fresh in her mind, haunted her. He had been her friend, her comrade. And now, his absence left a hole in her heart. The final charge surged through the ship. The gravity weapon hummed with unimaginable power, the last of its energy coursing through the Resolve systems. Outside, the Dreadlord loomed, its monstrous form floating in the void like a predator waiting for its prey. Carter steeled herself. This would be the final blow. "Fire the weapon," Carter shouted. The ship trembled as the gravity weapon unleashed its full force one last time. A burst of energy shot out, a massive wave of gravitational force that slammed into the warlord's flagship. For a brief moment, everything seemed to freeze. Then, the Dreadlord exploded. The force of the explosion shook the Resolve. The shockwave hit, sending the ship lurching forward. On the monitors, the Dreadlord's remains disintegrated into space debris, a fiery burst of light lighting up the cold emptiness of space. The alien fleet, already in disarray, was now without its leader. With no orders to follow, the remaining ships scattered, their formations falling apart as chaos overtook them. The humans had won. The bridge of the Resolve was silent for a moment. The crew members stared at the monitors, taking in the magnitude of what had just happened. The warlord was dead. The alien threat had been defeated, but the victory felt hollow. "Captain," Lieutenant Daniels spoke up, his voice strained. "The fleet is retreating. We've won. But the Resolve is heavily damaged. We've lost many good men and women." Carter's heart sank. She turned away from the monitors, her eyes scanning the bridge. The crew was battered, bruised, and broken. Many had given their lives, and some had sacrificed everything for this moment. Carter felt the weight of their loss pressing down on her. "Where's Bonner?" Carter asked, her voice low. Daniels hesitated. "He didn't make it, Captain. We lost him when we boarded the Dreadlord." Carter closed her eyes, a heavy sigh escaping her lips. Bonner. He had been more than just a soldier. He had been her right-hand man, her trusted friend. His death was a blow that cut deep. She could still hear his voice, still see his face, as if he were standing right there beside her. "You did what you had to do," Daniel said quietly. "He died a hero." Carter nodded slowly. "I know, but it doesn't make it any easier." The reality of their victory was sinking in now. The humans had defeated a superior force, using their wits, their bravery, and their unwavering resolve. But at what cost? So many lives had been lost in the battle. The cost of victory had been too high. But there was no time to dwell on it. Earth was safe. The aliens had been driven back. For the first time in years, Carter allowed herself a small moment of peace. She turned to her crew, seeing the tired, yet determined faces around her. "We did it," she said quietly. "We saved Earth." The crew nodded, each of them knowing that they had fought not just for survival, but for something greater. They had fought for their families, their homes, and for the future. They had fought for humanity. Outside the bridge, the stars seemed to shine a little brighter. The war was over, but the cost had been steep. The Resolve, though still standing, was severely damaged. The ship would need repairs, and the crew would need time to recover from the emotional toll the battle had taken on them. But the future was bright. As the crew began to regroup, Carter stood at the bridge window, looking out at the stars. Her thoughts were with those who had fallen. Bonner. The soldiers who had sacrificed their lives to protect Earth. Their names would never be forgotten. Earth had been saved. But the battle was just the beginning of something greater. The galaxy had seen humanity's strength, resilience, and unity. The Imperium would know that the human race was not to be underestimated. They would rise again if needed, stronger than ever. "Captain," Daniel said, his voice breaking through her thoughts. "The fleet is in retreat. Earth's forces are beginning the recovery process." Carter turned, nodding. "Good. It's time for Earth to rebuild." The final image in her mind was of Earth, blue and beautiful, spinning peacefully in the void of space. The human race had faced its darkest hour, but it had emerged victorious. The spirit of humanity, unbroken, had won the day. The last remnants of the alien fleet drifted away into the depths of space, and for the first time in a long while, the stars seemed to shine just a little brighter. The human victory was hard-earned. The sacrifices made were felt deeply, but the strength of their spirit, their unity, and their resilience had seen them through. The battle against the alien forces was over, but the true victory lay in the hearts of the survivors. They had proven to the galaxy that humanity would not go down without a fight. The final scenes reflected this triumph, showing Earth's slow recovery and the shining legacy humanity now carried across the galaxy. The story ends with a sense of closure, knowing that while they had faced impossible odds, humanity had prevailed.